Welcome, football fans, to Saturday Showdown, the ultimate touchdown for your college football fix. Each week, we'll dive into the hottest games, standout players, and pivotal moments that define the season. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just tuning in for the first time, we got all the stats, stories, and insights to keep you at the top of your game. So grab your favorite snack, get comfy. It's time to kick off another episode of Saturday Showdown.
Welcome back in, college football fans, to another episode of Saturday Showdown. We are joined tonight by Kent from Casual BIG10. Welcome into the show, man. How's it going?
Doing good. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk some college football tonight.
No problem. You know, kind of like the headline says here, the race for the college football playoff heats up as, you know, the top 10, and I want to say top 15 that could almost be essentially interchangeable here is getting tight. You saw this week some of the top teams not play their best, come close to getting knocked off, but found ways to win. You had other teams still continue to show why they are up in the top 10, top 15, you know, and we'll go ahead and jump into, with Kent here, some Big 10 games. First one, talk about Ohio State, 31-7 over Northwestern. They cruised to the win here. Will Howard, 247 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. Judkins, 2 touchdowns on the ground behind 76 yards. Just come out and took care of business is what Ohio State did here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the only thing, Ohio State's been so good this year. Everyone knows that, obviously. They've been beating people by a lot. They've been winning in different ways, and their offense is so good. And I think their defense doesn't get talked about enough. Maybe preseason I heard a lot about their defense, but their defense has been pretty good too. The only thing that gives you any concern if you're looking for a flaw with Ohio State is just the slow starts. Like, you would like a team like this to just like jump out on Northwestern and dominate from the beginning. And obviously Northwestern does not have the horses to go win that game. But if they win that first quarter, if you call that a win for Northwestern, you know, that's something that a really good team like Indiana coming up this week, if you let them jump all over you early, you might not be able to get it back. So if you're, like I said, this is if you're looking for a flaw. And again, this is kind of more of just like a talking point than anything because Ohio State is so good. So you kind of have to search for those type of things with a team like that. That would be the one thing that I would take away from this game and just be a little bit concerned about, I guess. But overall, no worries with this team. They're going to be in the college football playoff. They're going to be making a deep run in it and competing possibly for a national championship this year.
Yeah, I was actually I'm actually thoroughly surprised like with the adversity too. Some of their offensive line guys were hurt, especially coming into that Penn State game. They plugged some guys in, and I thought they played, that was like a big worry, especially of mine too, and they played phenomenally. They were able to get the ball moving in the air. They were able to get Judkins and Henderson moving on the ground. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that just because some of the guys were injured. And they're like, man, this could be a little bit of a flaw. Might be like a little chink in the armor. They might be able to go down there and Penn State might be able to, their defense might be able to get through and get things done. So I was surprised that they did that in that game. And then coming into this game, it should be a gimme game, but you never know. But yeah, they did well. The two-headed horse is right there back in that backfield. Henderson and Judkins still just chugging right along. And like you said, Kent, they do get on a slow start. And that's the only thing, like you said, if you're going to be concerned about, that's probably the only thing I could think of as well. So coming up this week, I know we'll talk about it, but I don't think playing against Indiana, I think that's something to be concerned about a little bit. Is, if Indiana is as good as they are saying they are, if Ohio State gets off to a slow start, let's say you go down, 14 points, do you have the firepower to be able to overcome Indiana, and make a comeback from that slow start? So I was happy to see him get the win, obviously, as an Ohio State fan myself. But yeah, it's just something to look forward to.
Yeah. That's true. This, like you said, we'll get into it, but that'll be Indiana's biggest test of the season. But I want to hit on something real quick because, we mentioned they played Northwestern this weekend. Well, Northwestern comes out and makes an insane announcement today regarding their football program, where they are going to be updating Ryan Field with a brand new stadium design that is going to be a $850 million project, the largest in college football history.
Yeah, I think it's insane. Like, and however you want to take that reaction, like insanely awesome. Like, that's going to be an incredible facility to go visit. I think that, if it comes if it comes together like it's supposed to, that should be where the Big Ten championship is at going forward. I think that was like my first thought is like, all right, this is going to hold a lot of people. It's going to be a really awesome venue. And which I don't know if they said how many seats they're projecting to have like in that, tweet that they put out. But at any rate, though, it's going to be like a world-class venue for college football. And I also say insane the other way because they're building this for the school out of the 18 schools in the Big Ten. I would pick them last to be a team that's going to spend almost $1 billion on a stadium. It's like they have the smallest fan base. So it's like, why are they spending so much money on this? This is wild. But I guess if they have it, like, I'm not judging them. Build an amazing stadium. I want to come see it. So I'm personally excited about it. It looks amazing. I think it's going to be something for like the Chicago area that's going to be more than just Northwestern Field. The way that they presented it in the video, they said it's going to be more of like a community, not like a community center, but I can't think of another word to say for it, like where they're going to hold events and things like that throughout the year. So it looks amazing.
Yeah, so if you look at some of the details about it, it's going to open in 2026. Surprisingly, with how big and everything, with the looks of, the pictures and the little video clips you see that they have mocked up there, the capacity is only going to be 35,000.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
It's interesting. For $850 million or whatever,
but,
you think you try to fit as many people in there as possible.
They said it will be the only college football stadium with adjacent ice skating rink. The $850 million sports and entertainment venue will be utilized year-round with more than 200,000 square feet of parks and plazas surrounding the stadium.
That part's cool. Like, I don't know if the ice skating rink is something that you can hang your hat on and be like, this is amazing. But like, okay, I guess that's awesome. I will say that part of the video too said that there's going to be no like benches. Everyone's going to have their own seat. So maybe that kind of played into like not being able to get as many in there. You look at some other stadiums, college, especially some of the bigger college ones, like they just have bleachers. And every year, those little numbers that are on the bleachers get a little bit closer and closer so they can fit more and more people in there. So maybe that's why it doesn't fit as many. I guess I take back what I say about the Big Ten Championship. I don't think that's enough to hold that event anymore. But, some of the Big Ten Championships, especially like the last 3 or 5 years, even like it's been a foregone conclusion who's going to win it anyway. So like not a lot of people even care to go to that. But with the expanded conference, I think that more people will want to go to it, so they won't be able to hold that there. I take that part back, but it's going to be nice though.
Do you think it can be used as like a recruiting type of tool as well? Like, do you think, like maybe we're spending $850 million on a stadium? We're gonna upgrade facilities. Like, do you think like maybe they're also doing this to like try to convince some, maybe some better talent to come to the team? I don't know if facilities would be the first thing a player looks at, but do you think that could be a reason they're willing?
I mean, if you play NCAA 25, that's definitely a reason for some of those recruits. Like they want the facilities, but in real life, I don't know if anyone. I think that if I take a step back and I think about recruiting, the kids that are getting recruited care about their own money more than where they're going to be playing at.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, like, if I'm Northwestern. And again, I don't know how much money they have to spend. Clearly, billions of dollars, it sounds like. Or I don't know where this is even getting financed. I don't know if taxes are paying for some of this or what. I haven't looked into it that closely. But if I'm Northwestern and I have X amount of dollars, I, as a fan of Northwestern, would want that money to go to the best players. And if I'm a player being recruited, I also want that money. I don't care if the stadium, like I'll play on the side of Lake Michigan all year. If you want to pay me, pay me.
True.
I'll play anywhere.
Well,
so and that's more important.
And that's kind of what you get here with on three sports kind of made that same point here, saying they asked the question, why spend nearly $1 billion on a stadium when you could just go out and use that money to buy some players?
Yeah, I guess I don't know why you would do that. But again, I don't know if that is money that's coming. I highly doubt that all of that money is coming directly out of the Northwestern Athletic Fund. And that's the same money that they're using to pay NIL fees for players. So I don't know if that's like the greatest comparison, because I doubt it's the same funds. But yeah, in a world where it was the same funds and is getting pulled from the same bank, yeah, I'd rather have the players than the facilities for sure. I think any fan would.
Yeah, 100%. Continuing on here, so insane Northwestern getting themselves a new stadium in 2026. We keep in the Big Ten. Penn State takes care of Purdue 49-10 here. Purdue drops to 1-9 on the season, 0-7 in the conference play. You know, Penn State sitting right up there at number 4. Drew Aller, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns in this game. The tight end Warren, 63 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground, 127 yards receiving, and 1 touchdown through the air. Penn State taking care of business here, where, you know, they're right up there, number 4, looking at one of those bids potentially outside of the automatic conference championship bids.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were going to win this game. Purdue is terrible. The fans want the Ryan Walters experiment to be over, I think, at this point. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. They did not get what they thought they were getting when they hired him out of Illinois. They thought they were going to get this great defensive team that's going to play great football. And this has been a year to forget for their football team for sure. So I don't blame them one bit. And I do think that the experiment is going to be over sooner rather than later. I'd be shocked if he's still coaching there to kick off the season next year. So that's everything about Purdue. Obviously, Penn State, great football team. Only the one loss. The schedule wasn't the hardest. I know Indiana, like, I keep going back to them. They get a lot of grief, I would say, for their schedule being kind of soft. Penn State's isn't great either. Like, they did not have a great schedule. It was almost like, we know they're going to win 11 at least, and if they can pull off an upset against Ohio State, they'll go undefeated. That's kind of what it was going into the season. That's exactly what's happened at this point. I'm excited for Penn State, though. It's been 2 years in a row where I thought that they've had a top 5 backfield. And I'm a big fan of running backs. So, like, I love Katron Allen. I love Singleton. I love those guys. So I'm hoping that they're going to do really great in the playoffs. I'm cheering for them, but it's going to be who they draw, though. Honestly, like, if they draw Georgia, that's going to be a tough draw for them, you know, or somebody like that. It's going to be tough, but they're a great team. And Aller doesn't get enough credit at all. A lot of people criticize him, but he's a really, really good quarterback. People forget, highest rated recruited quarterback coming out of his class. Like, he's good. He's really good. He's going to play in the NFL someday.
Yeah, Penn's. I hate talking about any other team that's not Ohio State, but Penn State's good. You know, I had my concerns when we played them. Their defense, I almost think Ohio State's defense. I don't think their defense. I think it gets overlooked, to be honest. I think their defense is really good. They got a good defensive line. The core is really good, and their safeties and free safety and cornerbacks, they're all terrific. The whole defense overall is a solid unit. The only problem I have with Penn State is that it seems like they can't win the big games when they need to. They can't overcome that obstacle. And I told Caleb 100 times leading up to the Penn State game that I thought if they were going to beat Ohio State, this was going to be the year. This was going to be the year that Ohio State could lose to Penn State, and they just couldn't do it. They had plenty of opportunities. They truly did, and they just could not overcome it. So I can't say I'm rooting for them, but it is going to be cool to see somebody else other than Ohio State, you know, and the college football playoffs, you know, with 4 teams. Now we're done, you know, now we have 12. So it is cool. I will never say never. You know, maybe they do go on a run. I think I think you're exactly right, Kent. I think it really just depends who they draw. If they pull some SEC team, I'm not going to say they can't win, but I just don't think the talent's probably great enough to overcome someone like Georgia or Texas, especially if they're playing like the best they could possibly play. But Penn State is also one of those teams that if they do catch fire, right, and they play their toughest that they could ever play, they're going to be a hard team to beat. There is no question about it. If Aller's playing on his game, Warren and the run game's going, and the defense plays like it's been playing, they could be a really hard team to beat, especially in a 12-team field. So,
Yeah, I mean, you said it there, Dylan. That's what I was going to say is, you know, like you said, if this year was going to, if any year is going to be the year, this year was their best chance to kind of, you know, to have their shot at the Big 12 or Big 10. And so, unfortunately, that they had that loss to Ohio State. So, you know, that kind of ruled them out there as far as when you're looking at the conference championships. So, yeah, I mean, they continue to keep themselves in the hunt for one of those at-large bids once you get after your, you know, 4 Power 4 conference champions and then your G5 bid there. So, you know, we'll jump over to Boise State, you know, talk about them, get your weekly Ashton Genty update. They take care of business against San Jose State 42-21, where they started this game a little slow. You know, they were down 7-0. Start the first quarter down 7-0. But after that, it was kind of a wrap, if you will, for San Jose State, because Boise State reeled off 3 straight quarters of 14 points. And Ashton Genty, another 3-touchdown game for the man. 32 carries, 159 yards on the season as he continues to rack up those yards and chase that record, if you will, that's been held by Barry Sanders. He is up to 1,893 yards on the season with 26 touchdowns, averaging 7 yards a carry.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch that game. It's a game that I couldn't bear to sit there and watch. But I watched the first probably the first half, and I was actually surprised because San Jose State was doing, out of anyone that has gone up against Boise State, Oregon included, they did the best job at stopping Ashton Genty from running the ball for as long as they possibly could. They literally were stuffing him repeatedly, holding him to 1 yard a carry, 2 yard a carry, really nothing more than 3 yards a carry for basically the first half. They were just standing him up. But a guy like Ashton Genty, he's always going to get his at some point in time. And San Jose State, that is to not have the backbone to stand in front of this guy for 4 quarters straight. They came out really he really started to come out in that second quarter, but once they came back after halftime, started that third quarter, it was Ashton Genty's show from that point on. That man was just a wrecking ball. And again, to have that many carries, that many yards, and it wasn't like it was well fought for. He fought for every yard. So I'm not sure he'll break a record this year, but it's pretty crazy to watch a guy have 26 touchdowns already, and we're not even into the playoffs. And that's just, that's just rushing touchdowns. This man has 26 rushing touchdowns. I want you guys to understand that. He's found the end zone 26 times with just running the ball. So the dude's an animal. So credit to Boise State. They keep trucking. They keep finding a way to win.
Yeah, I didn't watch this game, but I'm a big Detroit Lions fan. I've never hidden that from anybody. So I do not want any of Barry Sanders' records to ever be broken. He's the reason I started watching football. So and anytime he gets brought up and I see how long ago he played, it makes me feel real old. So I don't even want to talk about Barry Sanders, guys. It makes me feel old.
It's crazy that a record has held. And if I had to be honest, it's probably going to continue to hold. I mean, he had 2,800 rushing yards and 38 touchdowns in a season. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's not even funny, dude. I mean, it's really not.
That is crazy. Well, I think the game's evolved too. Like, not a lot of people are going on the ground that much anymore. Like, it's more pass oriented. So for Genty to even be that close, I feel like is kind of an anomaly at that.
I would agree.
I was about to say, if you look at it, he's about, give or take, around 800 yards short right now. You know, his Barry Sanders' record is 2,628. So, you know, Genty's sitting at a little over 1,800, and you know, with not much of the regular season left in playoffs, it would be tough for him to get there unless he just had some absolute monster games in the next few weeks. His pace slowed down. He had a couple games where he didn't get as many yards as, like, he started out the season with several 200, 300 yard rushing games, and then he's gotten slowed down a little bit, and I think that put a tough test or a tough roadblock, if you will, trying to get there. So
yeah, I mean,
like you guys said, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get there now. Earlier in the season, it looked like he was on pace to do it, but with some of these teams stepping up and limiting him on yardage, he's still getting those touchdowns in the end zone.
I was just looking this up real quick. It says that was in 11 games, and that the NCAA didn't include statistics for bowls until 2002. So even if he does break it, I'm not recognizing this as a record broken. I refuse.
I mean, to do what Barry Sanders did in only 11 games is absurd. I mean, that man was the exact same person that he was in the NFL as he was in college. Like, his game never changed. He never became a different person. He was the shifty, super fast, ball dominant running back, and no one was ever touching that guy. If he didn't want to be tackled, you weren't touching him. I mean, that's just basically how it was. He was breaking ankles and taking names, and that's basically what his game was.
Yeah. We'll jump back over to the Big Ten. Oregon beats Wisconsin 16-13 in one of the closest games of the weekend, with number one battling late in the game where they rallied in the fourth quarter to get the win here. Dylan Gabriel, not the best game here. He still throws for 218 yards, has one interception on the day. Dylan, I've talked about it several times on the show. It comes down to those turnovers will get you. Braden Locke for Wisconsin had a turnover himself with a pick. Jordan James, touchdown on the ground for Oregon. Their only touchdown of the game. And I think Oregon's lucky they escaped this one here in Madison. And, they really could have easily lost this game. But now with a win, I think they'll, got a nice week off here before they take on Wisconsin for their final game of the season. And I bet they bounce back and, finish the season 12-0. But, this game kind of probably opened some eyes up for them, saying, hey, Wisconsin stepped up here and really challenged these guys. And yes, they overcame it, but they nearly lost it there.
Yeah, I would argue they should have lost.
Yeah,
like, for sure. Wisconsin had two opportunities at home, balls in their hand. They got to go down and score a touchdown. The first one, there was still like 5 minutes left. They just had to go down and get a touchdown. They couldn't get a first down. And the second time, they almost didn't get the ball back had it not been for a fake field goal attempt on fourth down that Oregon failed at. Got the ball back again, and that's when Balake, as I call him, because that's what it says on the back of his jersey, Balake. I think that's funny. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But he throws his pass gets tipped, and it gets intercepted. So escaped is like a perfect word to use for that, because Oregon, just a couple plays away from losing their first game of the season. I mean, if Wisconsin could have put anything together, and Locke was so bad.
Oh my God.
That, and I hate to say this about a kid, but these guys are getting paid now, so I guess I don't really care. He was so bad, he cost his offensive coordinator his job. Phil Longo got fired the next day. So, I kind of felt bad. In fact, from an outsider, because I'm not super locked in on Wisconsin. That's not my team. So I was like, this seems kind of unfair. You know, they had Tyler Van Dyke from Miami last year that was going to start the season. He goes down in the Alabama game. And then Phil's sitting here with Braden Locke the rest of the season. He's trying to put wins together. And they say, oh, it's your fault that we're losing. I don't know about that. Yeah, second string quarterback all year. I don't know if that's fair to him, but I put that out on Twitter, and Wisconsin fans were elated that he was gone. I guess it was more of him and Fickle were just not getting along. Their styles didn't mesh together great. So a lot to take away for Wisconsin in this game. It's really interesting to think about what could have been if they did score a touchdown. Does Phil Longo still have a job right now? Or I can't imagine them firing if they won that game. So just a lot going on with Wisconsin, but a really entertaining game to watch though, and Oregon stays undefeated.
Yeah, I have to agree. God, I don't watch. I really don't watch any other games a whole lot. Other than Ohio State, but I was definitely interested in this game, obviously, because Oregon loses, Ohio State probably pushes back to the number 1 spot. It'd definitely be a toss-up, but Locke was miserable, and I don't think he's been great all season. I mean, I was screaming at my TV to put anybody else in. Just do anything else.
I don't think they have anybody.
Because it almost looked like he was nervous to do anything. I mean, some of the throws that he was making was abysmal. It was miserable. The offense couldn't get anything going. On the ground, their running back, he played decently well. I think he had, 97 yards on 20 carries, averaging 4.8 yards a game, or 4.8 yards a carry. But it seemed like they strayed away from him towards the end of the game too. And I mean, I understand you got to throw the ball, but when you only have 96 yards and an interception and a touchdown, I mean, you got to find other ways to get things done. But it definitely opened my eyes, because I've always said from the beginning of this year, since we've been talking about Oregon, I think Oregon's offense, this is the reason why they're really good. Their offense is able to score 35, 40 points a game. It's hard for people to keep up because they don't have the firepower that Oregon has. And I think their defense is a little bit lackluster behind that offense. I don't think it's as great. I think it's definitely improved. I just don't think it's the best thing about them. It seemed like this game was completely reversed. Their defense, I thought, played super solid. Their offense was very lackluster, and that's something you don't see from Oregon very often. Only 16 points is very unusual for a high-powered, fast-paced Oregon offense. So that definitely opened up my eyes to see that they are vulnerable, that they're not invincible on the offensive side of the ball. But luckily for them, Dylan Gabriel didn't have the best day, but where one person falls short, another one carries the load, and James was just an absolute force on the ground. 121 yards and that touchdown late in the game. That kid's an animal, man, and that's why Oregon's so good, because if they can't get it done one way, they will get it done another. So, Wisconsin had plenty of chances to win. I did a lot of yelling at my TV, and I'm very sad to see Oregon not lose this game, but all the more reason to see them in the Big Ten championship, hopefully. So
I think most people, if you're not an Oregon or Wisconsin fan, I think most people were cheering for Wisconsin because people love to see chaos, right?
100%.
Like they want to see like everything get shaken up. But I will say this, whatever you do coming out of this game, do not read into anything that Wisconsin did in the previous game, because this team has been so ridiculously hard to predict going forward. After a game, they'll be great one week. They'll blow out Rutgers. They'll come back the next week and they'll be terrible. It's just like you have no idea what you're going to get. I thought they looked good, they'll do it in a game, within a game. I thought they looked great against USC first half, and then they came out and they were brand new team in the second half, couldn't score, let USC come back on them. So it's just such a hard team to put your finger on. Like if you go out of that game and say, oh man, Wisconsin actually pretty good, they're hanging in there with like top 3 team in the country right now, they're definitely going to beat Nebraska next week, maybe, or they might get blown out. You have no idea what you're going to get from them. So it's really interesting with them.
Yeah. I feel that statement on a personal level, and that just leads me into the next game we're going to talk about here. Texas goes to take on my Arkansas Razorbacks in Fayetteville here. They win only 20-10.
Yeah.
And that's what what you just hinted on is the story of Arkansas's season. One week they look fantastic. The next week you're like, is this the same team? Like if you're talking about Arkansas, is this the same team that beat Tennessee earlier in the season, knocked off Tennessee at home, and then you come out of the bye week after that game and get beat by LSU, and then you get beat by 30 against Ole Miss at home, and then you turn around and defense plays its best game of the season. You hold Texas and that offense they have to 20 points, only a total of 315 yards. Quinn Ewers only throws for 176 yards in this game after they just had a week previously where they demolished Florida. And so, frustrating from an Arkansas fan standpoint as, yes, I'm glad we didn't get blown out by 40 points, which could have very possibly happened. But it's also frustrating in the sense of Arkansas had all the opportunities in the world to win this game. Offense, that was the story of the day, is no offense. 0 points scored in the first half. You hold Texas to 10 points at halftime. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like, okay, maybe we can come out and find something in the second half if defense can keep up the play and be in this game. Going late into the third quarter, Arkansas scores. You're down 13-7, and I'm like, okay, we're actually potentially in this game. And then just per Arkansas luck, Texas drives down the field. They in this game they fumble it, and unfortunately, the ball just rolls out of bounds right before the Arkansas defender is able to grab the ball. They get the field goal on that drive. Then the next drive, Arkansas goes down the field, overthrows a wide open man that would have been walk-in touchdown that puts you up 14-13. And then the following play, you throw the ball to a freshman. He gets the ball punched out, and it bounces right into the Texas defender's arms, and it's a ball game right there. I'm proud to see the fight that Arkansas had in this game. Taylon Green, such a dynamic player that he is, struggled in this one. Only 149 yards through the air, 1 interception on a tipped ball, -4 rushing yards as he was being flushed out of the pocket all game. That Texas defensive front is no joke. But yeah, Dylan, you said you watched part of this game, from an outside point. I think we talked about before we jumped on here. You kind of agree with what I was talking about.
Yeah, I was very upset to see that Arkansas couldn't get it done because they're a team this year that is so inconsistent. It's hard to watch. 1 week, they're really good and they beat Tennessee, and then the next week
inconsistent.
Yeah, 1 week they beat Tennessee and they're riding high. Tennessee's ranked 6 at the time. They walk in, they beat Tennessee. Next week they play Ole Miss and they allow 63 points or whatever. It's just so up and down. They started the game off well. I thought they had multiple opportunities to win this game. The fact that you held for 2 straight quarters, you held Texas to 3 points for 2 quarters in a row. There were so many opportunities to jump on the gun and get it moving, and you guys just couldn't get it done. Green, I don't want to say he played terribly, but in my eyes, he kind of did. He couldn't get the ball moving. Texas was all over him. Your guys' offensive line could not help him out one bit. That man would literally drop back. Someone was in his face instantaneously. Your guys' run game, because the pass couldn't get moving, the run game was not where it usually is. 11 carries for 56 yards. He did have the touchdown. But your guys' defense, I thought, played probably the best it's played all year. It was on point. Texas's offense is so high-powered and is able to move the ball against anybody and everybody. And you guys held them to 7, 3, 3, and 7. That's literally what they scored in every quarter all game long. You guys were able to hold them to that, but offense just got over on you guys. You guys could not move the ball, and that is going to be the story of the game. And I think if Arkansas could have that one back, I think they definitely would, because you guys had every opportunity to win this football game. It's just just wasn't in the cards that day, I guess. But I was definitely ready for some chaos to ensue. I was.
Yeah, we were insanely hoping for that. I mean, like you said, defensively, like you said, best game Arkansas probably played all season defensively. And the key to that was, you could tell they were getting pressure on Quinn Ewers and making him uncomfortable, forcing him to overthrow balls, underthrow balls, miss his wide receivers. And we hit him several times. We had several sacks where we were able to, collapse the pocket and get to him or force him to try to escape. Arkansas finishes the day with 2 sacks on Quinn Ewers. But if you think about it, you might have some quote unquote rush attempts by Quinn Ewers where he tries to escape the pocket. That's essentially still a sack, if you will. But yeah, I mean, like you said, that sums it up is, Arkansas had all the opportunities in the world, and that's been the story of the season, along with that inconsistency. And so now the talk is you've got 2 games left in the season for Arkansas, trying to get that 6th win, get bowl eligible. Sam Pittman, the guy that starts the season on the hot seat, starts a decent season, gets a big upset at home over Tennessee. You think, okay, seats cooled off a little bit the way this season, and then you lose big to LSU, lose big to Ole Miss in both home games. That seat's starting to heat back up, and it's going to be an interesting finish for this Arkansas football team. Louisiana Tech this week should be your bowl eligibility win, but you can't count on anything. And then Missouri to wrap up the season in a quote-unquote rivalry game that I'm not acknowledging as a rivalry game. So other games this week that were big in college football. Kansas knocks off BYU, undefeated BYU. Kansas goes into Provo, Utah, and knocks off the undefeated, BYU Cougars that were leading the Big 12. And Kansas has all the opportunities to make another big win next week, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit with the matchup against Colorado. But, I mean, Kansas comes out and does their thing. That's just a massive win for them, for a team that could go in to Provo, Utah, tough place to play. And, kind of like we talked about with some other teams, BYU started the season really well, but at some point, and like we talked about Oregon, in this case, they do lose this game, in a game that, was close right up until the end, and then Kansas reels off a touchdown in the 4th quarter to get the win here. So,
yeah. And how about BYU losing and they just get absolutely crucified by the AP polls and the college playoffs? I mean, dropped from, what were they? They were
dropped from 6 to 14.
Yeah, I mean, with a loss. And I think Kansas is better than what their record shows. But we did talk about it last week. I did not pick Kansas to win. One of us did. I can't remember who it was that we had on last week. I can't remember which one picked, but he did pick Kansas to win. But I did say that I would not be surprised if Kansas does go in here to BYU and they win, especially if Daniels can get his legs moving. Now, he had 10 carries for 15 yards, but those 15 yards that he got, they were crucial, first downs and everything. They just could not stop him from rolling out of the pocket. It definitely disrupted BYU's kind of game flow. Their defense, I don't think, is really used to quarterbacks that are mobile and move that well. And he only had 169 yards in the air with a turnover, but they were able to get it done on the ground. I mean, Neal, their running back, 14 carries, 52 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. And Kansas' defense played phenomenal, I thought. They had 2 sacks. They were all over that offense. BYU didn't play. I mean, they didn't play terribly, but that as we always say, those turnovers will always get you. And to throw an interception and to lose a fumble as well, that's just not going to win you games, especially when you do it in crucial moments. So, unfortunately for BYU, They were on the move. They were about this close to going on a perfect season, but now they gotta, they gotta fight these last couple weeks to make sure that they get a spot in the playoffs because they got hammered right there with that loss to Kansas. So,
yeah, 100%. They've got to win out, and it's getting much closer to. It looks like we're going to have a BYU Colorado Big 12 championship game, and man, would the media love to see Colorado go in there and get the win and get that automatic bid into the college football playoffs. Talk about the media with Dion getting his way into the playoffs in a conference championship bid there. So
I saw Kansas play. I know I don't know a lot about the other conferences other than the Big Ten, but obviously Illinois played Kansas earlier this year, so I kind of kept tabs on them just to see how good that win was going to be for Illinois when all was said and done. And watching them just lose week after week after week after week, I stopped following them. I was like, this team stinks. I'm not going to follow them anymore. And then I saw that score, and I was like, how? I don't understand this. I don't understand this sport anymore. I don't know anything. So maybe I should have kept more tabs on them and kept watching them. I don't know. Sounds like it was a good game. I didn't watch it.
It was.
I mean, story of the season is all this chaos and stuff. And you talk about it we jump over to the SEC. A Florida team that we talked about at the beginning of the year, Dylan and I, they continue to struggle and just look bad, knocks off LSU. LSU seems to be on a downward trajectory in the past few weeks. Florida gets a big win here. They're 5-5. They get DJ Lagway, their star freshman quarterback that, was kind of forced into the starting role after Graham Mertz tears his ACL. He goes 13 of 26 for 226 yards and a touchdown through the air in this game. And then they also rely on this rushing attack between Jaden Baugh and Jacoby Jackson, both those guys having a touchdown, a little over 100 yards on the ground for them. And, man, this Florida team's really turned it around, especially after kind of acknowledging, hey, they came out, athletic director puts out the statement, hey, we're keeping Napier for another year. After everybody was really calling for him to be done the way the season has got started off for them. And they've slowly turned it around here, 500 on the season, 3-4 in conference play, one more game, and they're bowl eligible.
Yeah, it was just a big, big day for Florida, big plays. I mean, I can't even talk about their offense, to be honest, because I still think their offense is so mediocre. It's unbearable.
It's their defense.
Yeah, their defense had 7 sacks on the day. 7. Their defense was all over LSU at every point of every corner of every turn in this game. But it still blows my mind that they won this game. LSU had double the first downs. They were 13 of 24 on third down, 2 of 4 on fourth down. They ran 92 plays to Florida's 43. They punted the ball 2 times less, had 4 less penalties, and had the ball for over 41 minutes to Florida's 18 minutes, and they still lost the game. They controlled the ball like 90% of the game and still lost. And the main falling point of this whole thing is Florida was able to get on defense and take care of the ball, and LSU wasn't. They were not able to get after Lagway at all. The defense could not break through Florida's front line, and LSU also had the fumble. So it blows my mind that you're able to control every aspect of the game, and all because the defense. I mean, you let Florida just beat you defensively. That's all you did. You let them sack Nussmeier 7 times and just be all over him, which blows my mind because Florida has not been great on defense all year either. They've been very lackluster in both categories.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game where it was ironic. They talked about even, forcing those sacks as well. LSU fumbles the ball twice on the same play at one point where Nussmeier's flushed out of the pocket, the rush gets to him, knocks the ball out of his hands. The ball's picked up by one of their offensive linemen. He starts running down the field. The Florida defender comes in and punches the ball out there. So you had a double fumble on a play. And, yeah, like you said, the day continued to get worse for Florida or for LSU as, 7 sacks, a double fumble on the same play. It just wasn't their day. And, Florida's able to capitalize there. And, seems like they could be turning around their season. They're 1 win away from being bowl eligible, and that would be saying something the way their season started out.
I'm sorry. I wish I could add something for you. I'm sorry. I don't watch them. So they're at what? What's their record right now? What you're talking about, Florida, right?
Yeah, they're 5-5.
Okay, that's surprising. That because I don't follow the SEC as much as I do the Big Ten, obviously. But I'm used to Florida being in big bowls all the time. So for them to be fighting for one, it's kind of like Michigan in the Big Ten this year. For them to go from what they were the last 3-4 years, 3 years especially, and then to be just like scratching and clawing to try to get to any bowl right now is just really weird to see. So I feel the same way about Florida. I didn't realize that their record was that bad, but yeah, that's tough for them.
Yeah, Florida, they struggle. I mean, ever since the Urban Meyer eras, they had, I think, 1 or 2 good years after that, and they've just, I don't know, almost like fell off the face of the earth. They don't get the biggest recruits anymore. To be honest, it's a big school. I'm not saying they don't get any 4 or 5-star recruits, but it's not like it used to be. I mean, the fact that you're one of the, you're considered one of the top schools in the SEC, or at least you used to be, and you fight. Basically, you're fighting for a bowl game every year. So it's definitely sad to see, because Florida used to be, top of the world, and they're just not those guys anymore. They're not.
Yeah. One final game before we move on here to this next upcoming week. One of the bigger games of the week going into it before we had some of these other exciting games. Tennessee headed to Athens to play Georgia, and what was a must-win game for Georgia to keep those playoff hopes alive. And they get the win here, 31-17. There was some thought early in the week that Nico wasn't going to play for Tennessee. He ends up being able to go, getting cleared, and gets to go. And to what we talked about last week, Dylan, Carson Beck actually has a decent game this week. Throws for 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, even rushes for a touchdown here. So, man put Georgia on his back and said, "Okay, it's do or die here," and he helped them get the victory here, and that gave Tennessee its second loss in conference play. Georgia keeps itself in the hunt for the playoffs here. I mean, what a game for Georgia to bounce back after that loss to Ole Miss.
Yeah, I still don't think Georgia's that good. I still think Carson Beck is not that good. He had one good game. If you take away this one game, he's thrown like 12 interceptions in like the last 6 games. So, he had one good game. I'm happy for him. Whatever. But this game felt like the Oregon-Wisconsin game to me. Sampson is probably one of the best running backs in college football right now. Puts the back on his team. Nico, their quarterback for Tennessee, could not move the ball to save his life. He had 167 yards in the air, and that was it. And there was plenty of opportunity for them to go back and forth to Georgia and keep it moving, because it was back and forth for the whole first half. And then Georgia coming out in that second half, Georgia just kind of took over. I mean, it was 17-17 going into halftime, and they held Tennessee to nothing the whole second half, and Georgia just continues to move the ball and get it done. So I was pretty disappointed in Tennessee's performance, especially offensively, especially throwing the ball. And their defense did as much as they possibly could, but whenever your offense can't score, at some point in time, Georgia's going to. So
Yeah. I mean, Georgia stepped up when they needed to, and like I said, this was a must-win game for them to keep their hopes alive. And you see here, they were 12, Tennessee was 7, and you look at it coming into this week, AP poll, after Georgia getting the win at home, you see now that bottom, part of that top 10/12 is heavily in, with SEC teams. You got Alabama at 7, Georgia at 8, Ole Miss at 9, Tennessee at 10. So Georgia jumps up a couple spots, Tennessee drops down 3 spots, and it just makes the SEC as a whole chaotic. But then, at this point, it's like, other than the SEC champion, at this point, you don't even know who could even get one of those other at-large bids at this point.
Yeah, it's predominant. I mean, obviously you're going to have the championship winners or whatever, but they're going to fit in as many Big Ten and SEC teams as they possibly can that obviously are worth it. I mean, obviously you're not going to put someone like Northwestern or Wisconsin in there, but Penn State's going to be in there, Ohio State's going to be in there, Oregon's going to be in there, Indiana. Even if they lose to Ohio State, you lose one game all year and it's to one of the best teams in college football. I would say you're not going to get penalized for that too much. I mean, there's 4 big teams I can think of just right there. And then SEC wise, I mean, Georgia probably going to make it. I mean, Tennessee's probably going to make it. Alabama, Texas. I mean, yeah, just between those guys, just between those 2 conferences, I mean, you're talking a possibility of 8 teams just from those 2 conferences. So, yeah.
Who's in line to be in the SEC championship? And then follow up, if someone is in that game that has 2 losses and they take another one, does that count against them?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I would say Texas is probably a shoe-in for the SEC championship game. I would say they're probably going to be in there. And then after that, it's really a toss-up. Tennessee had the best chance to be able to be in there if they would have beat Georgia, because Alabama already has 2 losses and Georgia has 2 losses. Tennessee was the only team with just 1 loss that could have went in there, and if they would have beat Georgia, I guarantee they would have been in. But now that they've lost, I don't know. I would say it's between any of those, because it's difficult, because you have Alabama who beat Georgia, but they lost to Tennessee, and Tennessee who has lost to Georgia. So I don't know. It's those 3. It's like a revolving relationship between those 3 teams, because one team has beat the other and then lost to the next guy. So
yeah. So if you look at the SEC standings going into week 13 here, Texas A&M and Texas are the 2 1-loss teams in the conference, and they play the last week of the season at Texas A&M. So that's going to be, one of those teams is going to get a loss there, which then that boils down to all the 2-loss teams. And, shout out to SEC Mike for, breaking this down here he said, if Alabama wins out and Texas A&M beats Auburn and Texas, which is their final 2 games, you'll have an Alabama A&M SEC championship game.
So does that mean that, like 2-loss Georgia versus 2, like, let's say that Alabama loses that SEC championship game. Now they have 3 losses. Is Georgia now better than them and they have a better shot to get into the playoff? That's the part that I'm confused about, because like we're not dealing with that in the Big Ten really, because it's going to be it's definitely going to be a 1-loss team. Yeah, in the Big Ten championship, like there's not going to be a 2-loss team in there for sure. So
I would say if Alabama loses, I don't think you can respectively put them in the college playoffs, to be honest. 3 losses, I mean, it's Alabama, so it wouldn't surprise me.
I was about to say, hold up there a minute.
I was going to say, do you remember last year?
I don't think a 3-loss team should be in there.
I don't either.
If you lose, I mean, there are other teams that are going to have 1 loss or 2 losses. I'm not saying they're better than Alabama, but I don't really think that's how it should be based off of. I mean, if you have 3 losses and all these guys in front of you have 1 loss, I mean, something's got to give. I understand you play in a tough conference, but something there you have to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah, I guess my question though is like, is Georgia better than them if they don't have they didn't have a chance to lose that third game in the SEC championship? If Alabama goes and loses that game, that's like an extra game that they played that no one else had to play that has 2 losses. It's like, well, they were in the championship. That counts for something, but it's like now they got a third loss. So it's like now all these other teams that didn't make the championship are all of a sudden in the playoffs and Alabama's not. It would be really interesting to see how the committee's going to play all that out if it shakes out like that.
I would hate to
I think
say
part
this,
of it is you have to look at strength of schedule too.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting thing. I saw a graphic today. It was talking about strength of schedule for non-SEC college football playoff contenders, with the asterisk saying no SEC team ranks below 38th nationally in strength of schedule. So every SEC team is 38 or above. The rest of the contenders, Oregon, 43rd strength of schedule. Ohio State, 28. Penn State, 35. Indiana, 106. BYU, 53. Notre Dame, 82nd. Miami, 54. Boise State, 76th. SMU, 86th. And Colorado, 73rd.
Yeah. I don't know if I could say Georgia would be better than Alabama. If you make it to the SEC championship game, you're obviously one of the best in the SEC, but Georgia also did lose to Alabama. So, I mean, it'd be really hard to say that Georgia is better than Alabama, even if they would have 3 losses. I don't know. They're going to have their hands full because I'm going to say 90% of the teams are going to come from the SEC and Big Ten. I mean, I get you got to put the respective championship winners right in there, but they're going to fit as many as those guys. They're going to fit as many as Big Ten and big SEC teams as they possibly can in there. So that's a hard question to answer because I'm going to say no. I don't think Georgia would be better than Alabama if Alabama would have 3 losses. And that's just because if it would shake out like that, 1, you beat Georgia, and 2, you made it to the SEC championship game. It'd be hard for me to say that Georgia's the better team.
Man, wouldn't that be the icing on top of the cake of what's been this chaotic football season for that to happen? So insanity. We'll see what continues these final few weeks here of the college football season and what shakes out. You know, there's some big time matchups like we just talked about. Texas A&M, you know, the state of Texas and the SEC right now, you know, Texas A&M and Texas, one of them are going to be the clear-cut number 1 in the conference. And, you know, they play each other the final week of the season in the, you know, the quote-unquote rivalry week games. So it's going to be interesting. As we jump over to week 13, we'll start with go through our pick 'em. And lo and behold, the first game they have us picking Indiana at Ohio State. Why this game is at 11 a.m., I don't know. This is the second time they did that to Ohio State where a marquee matchup was put midday. And I guess they just don't letting you guys play at night at home, Dylan. But Columbus, Ohio, Indiana hits the road for their toughest test of the season. Ohio State favored by 11.5 in this game, over under 52.5. You've got Will Howard, you've got Rourke. On paper, it seems like this should be a fun matchup to watch. Like we said, Indiana hasn't really played anybody. You know, their probably toughest game of the season has been Michigan, and we've already established Michigan is not that great. They barely won that game 20-15. So, you know, what do they do when they come in to Ohio State and, you know, they have that incredible 2-headed rushing attack? You got Will Howard that's a great game manager and gets the ball to these talented wide receivers. It's going to be a tough task for Kurt Cignetti and this Indiana team.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want me to go first on this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would love to. Okay. Well, to answer your first question, I know exactly why it's at 11 a.m. It's because it's the big noon kickoff, and they have it seems like the first pick of whatever game that they want. And this is a product of expanding the conference and receiving millions upon millions of dollars from TV networks. Is you are at their beck and call. You don't get to pick what time you're playing anymore. Sorry. If you're a marquee team, Fox gets the highest rated numbers on the big noon kickoff, from what I've been told. So yeah, it'd be nice to sprinkle in some night games here and there for the Buckeyes, but every time they play somebody big, it's they had the one game with Oregon that was at least an afternoon game, or at least it ended up being at night by the time it was over. But that's why they don't play these games at any other time. Can't wait for this game. I mean, I said that Oregon Ohio State was going to be the game of the year, and I stick by that. I still think that game is going to ultimately be like the game we look back on and say, like, that was the closest game the two best teams in the conference played, and we already saw that. But I was not expecting this resurgence from Indiana this year, so this is 1A for me, like, game of the year. I think that I don't know if you guys pick against the spread, but if you're picking against the 11.5, I'm taking the points, and I'm taking Indiana because they're undefeated. I know they haven't played the hardest schedule, but it's hard for me to fathom a world where an undefeated team, even going on the road to a tough place like Ohio State, Cignetti gets those guys so ready for everything, and they're coming off a bye, so it's like they're extra ready right now. They should be for the biggest game of that school's entire history. And it's hard for me to foresee them losing by 2 touchdowns when they haven't lost all year. So I would take the points. I'm not saying that I think I'm not predicting Indiana to win. I probably would say that it's Ohio State by a touchdown. If I had to put a week's pay on it, I guess.
I was about to say, yeah, here we usually will just do a straight up pick the winner of the game.
Okay. So I'll say that I'm picking Ohio State then.
Dylan?
Yeah, I'm gonna take Ohio State. Listen, Indiana's good. It's exciting that we're getting a resurgence from a handful of teams. You know, I know Penn State's always good, but this year I thought they were better than the past recent years. Indiana, it's good to see somebody else come through. It's not just Michigan and Ohio State. It's nice that we have Oregon in here now. It creates for a lot more excitement than just like waiting to the end of the year. 2 teams playing at the second game to the end of the year. You got Michigan, Ohio State. That's how it's been for the last handful of years. So I'm happy to see a couple of these teams get added, and I'm happy to see Indiana, have this resurgence, if that's what we're calling it. But I'm taking Ohio State. Indiana hasn't played really anybody all year. I'm not trying to say they're not a good team. I think their defense is better than their offense. Defensively, they're very sound. But listen, Ohio State is predominantly one of the bigger schools in college football. We're going to get more talent. We're going to get more of the prospects. I think we have more talent on our team, not trying to put Indiana down. And I think when push comes to shove, I do think Ohio State is more talented. I think we're the better team. I think defensively we're going to get after Warwick. I don't think he's really seen a defense like ours all year long. Offensively, that's the only thing I'm worried about is a slow start, because if Indiana can just find any success at all and we go down, I don't know how we're going to recover from that. That's the only thing that I'm super worried about. We have to get off to a fast start offensively. I think Will Howard needs to assert his dominance, if I'm going to say that, through the air. I think we need to get Judkins and Henderson rolling immediately. But yeah, I'm taking Ohio State. I think we're more talented, and I think our defense is probably going to play the main part in this whole thing, just because I don't think Indiana has really faced a defense quite like ours all year.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's definitely going to be an interesting game. Like you guys said, it's been impressive what Kirk Cignetti has done with this team in just year one, and that earned himself last week a contract extension in year one that puts him under contract through 2032 and making $8 million a year after not even a full season. So I looked this up today. He went 11-1 last season at James Madison and was making $600 and I believe it was like $77,000 was his pay. His initial contract with Indiana, he was making a little over $1 million. And now after a 10-0 start, he's getting the big bucks, got that contract extension. I think this Indiana fan base is all in on what's going on the football field, especially with Indiana historically being known as the basketball school. They, are widely known as that, and it's interesting. But for the sake of this game, I'm going to be excited to watch this matchup. And just for the heck of it, give me the Hoosiers in this one.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Just for the fun. By the way, Cignetti, he surrounds himself with the best people. And the people I'm talking about is his agent. For his agent to go in and get this done right before the Ohio State game, genius.
Oh, yeah.
Genius. Because if he loses this game, he's going to be like, hey, I want more money now. It's like, wait a minute, buddy. I like the start, but you got to keep winning. So I think it's so weird that they did that in the middle of the season. I don't know if the AD or whoever signed him, whoever signed him to that contract, I don't know if they just didn't look at the schedule or what. It's like, there's a chance you're going to lose coming up. I don't know. Maybe they're just like, we've seen enough already. We know this guy is all in on Indiana. And, from their fan base's point of view, they don't want him getting poached by anyone else and just throwing a number at him and taking him away. So good to lock him up. I guess it's good on both parts. It's a win-win. They lock him up and he gets the contract right before the biggest game ever. So he doesn't have to think about it anymore, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that's why I kind of think they did that, is because there's going to be some firings at the end of the year. There's going to be some coaching searches, and there's going to be some probably a school or two you might not expect to be looking for a coach. That he took James Madison to the top. He came in year one in the Big Ten and is undefeated so far. And will probably finish the season with no or one loss, and that's going to be impressive for the best season that Indiana's had in school history. And, if you're the other team out there looking for a coach that has the financial means, and you see what Kirk Cignetti does, like you said, he surrounds himself with good people, but you look at the success he's able to have, why wouldn't you want to go after him? And this just makes that even harder. And I think that was the whole idea, was Indiana's like, we might have struck gold here, so let's go ahead and just lock him up for the foreseeable future. And if a school wants to come shell out the money for the buyout and then give him a new contract, fine by us, but that would take a lot of financial backing if you wanted to pull him away from Indiana after that.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as recruitment and stuff goes too, I mean, it was picture perfect. Indiana's always been kind of a mid football team. The fact that he was able to do like that in a season, and I mean, make them good all over again, like they're just a solid football team. I mean, it was smart for them to do that. And now I would say what players look at too is how sound is your football team? How secure? If I'm going to go there, not only do I want to play and be good, but I want the team to be good. I want to have a chance at the college football playoffs. I want to have a chance at a national championship. And the thing that players look at is a coach. Is this a team that's going from coach to coach? Do they have a coach who knows what he's doing? Is everyone there, mindly sound? Do we all have the same objective? And I think that this puts them up in that category. I mean, more recruits are going to look at Indiana now because, they seem to be a team that is in the end now. So it was definitely a smart thing for them to do, going forward, especially for their football team. So.
Yeah, 100%. We'll jump over to Sam Houston and Jacksonville State at Amherst Stadium, Jacksonville, Alabama. You have Jacksonville State favored by 6.5. This one, they are coming off a win over FIU 34-31, sitting at 7-3 on the season, 6-0 in conference play. You have Sam Houston coming off the overtime win against first-year Kennesaw State in Conference USA. And, this has a chance to be, it looks like a matchup that could have some conference implications for these two teams. You look at the two quarterbacks in this game, Huff and Watson. Both these guys seem to be more of gunslingers. One has 9 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. The other has 11 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Stewart for Jacksonville is their offense on the ground, 190 carries, 1,200 yards on the ground with 19 touchdowns. Very impressive there. I'm going to go ahead and say give me Jacksonville in this one. I think they're going to lead this running game behind Stewart that they've done all season and get the win over Sam Houston here.
Yeah, I'm about to say the same thing. I know nothing about either of these teams. I didn't even know if Sam Houston Bearcats was a team, to be honest. I don't watch that in-depth with some of these college football teams. But 190 carries, 1,200 yards, 19 touchdowns. I mean, you're obviously doing something right. 6-0 in conference play, like you said. That probably doesn't stop there if you're on a roll like that. So I'll take Jackson State.
You said the other team's the Bearcats. That was my high school mascot, so I'll take the Bearcats. Sam Houston. Let's go. Let's go Bearcats.
Next matchup, staying in Conference USA, you have the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers taking on the Liberty Flames in Lynchburg, Virginia. Western Kentucky favored by 1.5 in this game. Western Kentucky is sitting right there tied with Sam Houston, the team we just talked about in Conference USA at number 2 behind Jacksonville State that's undefeated. Western Kentucky is coming off a loss to Louisiana Tech 12-7. Liberty coming off a win over UMass 35-34 in overtime. This is a game. Salters for Liberty, 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season. Cooley, 162 carries, 998 yards, 11 touchdowns. This is a big game for Conference USA. Veltkamp for Western Kentucky, 2,100 yards to the air, 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. They're running back Young, 587 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. This one I think has the chance to be an interesting game. You see Western Kentucky, 7 points in their last game, whereas you go back and look through Liberty's games, consistently putting up 30 points with high-scoring offenses. I'm going to take Liberty in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take Liberty too. It seems that their offense is a little more sound, especially on both sides, not just, they're not one-dimensional. They can run the ball and throw it pretty well. So I think as long as their defense can play 60%, I think that they probably win this game. So I'll take Liberty.
I'll take Liberty as well. I don't know anything about these guys.
Yeah,
Other than what you just told me. I learned that.
There you go. Learning something every day there as we jump back over to Power 4 conference football. BYU, Arizona State. This has the chance to be an interesting game. We just talked about it. Kansas knocks off BYU this past week, and then you have Arizona State surprisingly having a successful season so far in the Big 12, sitting at 8-2, 5-2 in conference. If you look at the conference standings right now, BYU sitting up there up top, but you've got Arizona State right there. Colorado sitting at 6-1 as well. So the top 2, BYU and Colorado. But Arizona State has the chance to make this one very interesting regarding the Big 12, as BYU will travel to Tempe, Arizona, and Mountain America Stadium, and they come into this game the underdog by 3.5. BYU is going to want to bounce back after a tough loss against Kansas last week. But this Arizona State team is playing some good football right now. They knocked off Kansas State last week, 24-14. Like we said, BYU coming off that loss to Kansas. Retzlaff for BYU, 2,200 yards to the air, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 2-to-1 ratio there. On the other side of the ball, you've got Cam Scatabo for Arizona State, 198 yards, 188 carries, 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns on the season. This one has a chance to be an interesting game when it comes to the Big 12, because if they knock them off here, and Colorado wins, that puts them in the driver's seat in the Big 12, and the media will take that and run with it. So, your guys' thoughts on this game?
I'll take BYU on a bounce back game after a tough loss last week. I like that one.
Yeah, I'm also going to take BYU. I think they probably bounce back. I don't, Arizona State's also the same team that lost to Cincinnati, so that's just a little too inconsistent for me. I know they put off some good wins, but I just think BYU overall is, when push comes to shove, I just think BYU is a better team.
Yeah. I agree there. I see this BYU team being a team that will bounce back after one of those tough games, and get the win here. With it being in Tempe, Arizona, I will say I think BYU does get the win, but don't count the Sun Devils out. They've been playing some good football, like Dylan said. They had that one loss to Cincinnati, but you look at their other games. They have the ability to score points, put up 42, 35 against Oklahoma State, UCF, two of the probably lesser teams in the conference. But yeah. So I know you said you gotta head out of here, Kent, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us and talk some football.
Yeah, sorry to cut you guys off in the middle of the picks here, but I didn't know what time we were going to end, so I do got to go put my kiddos to bed. I appreciate y'all having me on, though. This was fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you jumping on and talking Big 10 football with us and various other games. But yeah, we appreciate it.
All right, y'all have a good night. We'll see y'all soon.
Yep.
See ya.
Dylan and I will round out the picks here. But so you said you're going BYU. I'm going BYU, but anything could happen in this one. I think this one has the chance to be an interesting game to watch. Staying in the Big 12, Colorado, Kansas. This is technically a home game for Kansas, but they've been playing their home games this season at Arrowhead Field, where the Chiefs play. So this game will be at Arrowhead Stadium. Colorado heads to Kansas City to play the Kansas Jayhawks. Colorado favored by 2.5 in this game. Shedeur Sanders, man, what a season he's had. 3,222 yards through the air and 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. 9 of those going to Travis Hunter, who's 911 yards receiving on the season as well. Still no run game. We've talked about that. Their leading rusher has 362 yards on the season. This is just the offense that we get with Colorado. Jalen Daniels, 1,900 yards through the air, 13 touchdowns to 10 interceptions for Kansas. David Neal, 926 yards, 12 touchdowns is rushing attack for Kansas. What do you think, Dylan?
I'm gonna take Colorado. I'm taking Colorado. I think every game this year so far, I think I've basically picked them to win, even the games they lost. To be honest, I know I'm a big fan of Shedeur Sanders. I honestly can't believe he's not being talked about as a potential Heisman winner. I know we have like Ashton Genty and stuff, and no offense to Travis Hunter, but I think Shedeur Sanders is probably better than Travis Hunter. That's probably a hot take, but this man is literally doing all this with no run game and a mediocre offensive line. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 0 help on the run. I mean, absolutely none, 0, and a very mediocre offensive line. The most mediocre offensive line that money could buy is literally what he's playing with. And they're 8-2, and they're about this close to making the college football playoffs, and everyone's going to go absolutely crazy if that happens. because they are a very high-powered team. I couldn't imagine how good they would be if they had something of a run game. Like, if they had a guy like Ash John Genty on their team, could you imagine how good this team would be? It'd be absolutely unbelievable, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would be insane because then you got to think, they're probably not sitting at 8-2 right now. They might not lose to Kansas State. They might not lose, the game they had earlier in the season. I mean, that could transform this team. And if you're talking about what Deion might do in the offseason, and I will say, if he's still there, that could be a real possibility, with his son moving on, Travis Hunter moving on. There's a real possibility Deion moves on as well, whether that be to another big-time job outside the Big 10 or Big 12, or I highly doubt he goes pro as far as coaching. But I'm with you. I take Colorado here. This is setting itself up to be the media's dream here for them to get the win, get to the Big 12 championship game, and potentially make a push for that playoff spot. So give me Colorado on this one to go into Arrowhead Stadium and get the win over Kansas. I don't know if Kansas has it in them to knock off a top team 2 weeks in a row. That's a tough ask for this Kansas Jayhawk team.
They are playing hot, though. They did beat ISU, who was ranked, and they did beat BYU. I mean, both I don't think are the best top teams out there, but BYU and ISU are both very tough. So don't be surprised if Kansas. I mean, if they make this a game, do not be surprised, people, if they do put up a fight.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It could be a close game, but I feel like at the end, though, you probably get Colorado and Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter just, wills this team to win here. But it could be, don't count Kansas out. Maybe they're feeling good playing in Arrowhead, get some vibes going, some of that Mahomes energy, even though they did lose yesterday. But, they're playing on his home turf. So we'll jump over to the SEC. We talked about it as far as implications for the SEC. Texas A&M going on the road to Jordan-Hare Stadium this weekend to take on the Auburn Tigers, 4-6 on the season. A&M's 8-2, 5-1 in conference. Flip that record around, and that's what Auburn is, 1-5 in conference play. Surprisingly, the spread is 2.5 here. I mean, unless
2.5.
Vegas knows something, I don't know, man. Like, it's
because Auburn's horrific. I mean, I'm surprised they have 4 wins, to be honest. They're not very good. But wouldn't that be some absolute chaos if Texas A&M would lose?
I mean, I want to say that would solidify things for the SEC, but not necessarily, because say that happens, Auburn wins, Texas A&M falls to 2 conference losses, but then you have 1-loss Texas come to A&M and then lose, and then you have a bazillion 2-loss teams in the SEC. It's like, at that point, let the chaos just continues to ensue. But A&M's coming off a 38-3 win over New Mexico State, kind of getting back in the winning column after a close big game against South Carolina. Auburn coming off a win against UALM, 48-14. They put up 48 points in a game this season.
Wow.
I think that's probably their highest total all year. Peyton Thorne, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Jaquez Hunter, 1,000 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns. So some type of running game they got going there. But, I mean, the thing for Texas A&M, you've got Marcel Reed, who started. I think you've seen him start a lot of games when Connor Wegman went down earlier in the season. Wegman gets healthy, they go back to him, and then Marcel Reed comes in and plays hero against LSU in Death Valley, at home against LSU, and then goes on the road. He gets the call there against South Carolina, and they lose 44-20. And so the quarterback is an interesting. I think that plays a big thing here for this A&M team. It's probably going to be Marcel Reed getting the start on the season. In his starts, he has 1,129 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But, on the road, he struggled at South Carolina. Even though Auburn isn't great this year, Jordan-Hare is a tough place to play in. I wouldn't rule anything out, but I am, unfortunately, as it pains me to say, go with A&M in this game. But your thoughts there, Dylan?
Yeah, I'm gonna take Texas. I'm gonna take Texas A&M. Auburn. Auburn's terrible. They're not gonna win this football game. It's just not happening. It'd be crazy. It'd be absolutely crazy to do, just because Texas A&M already has 2 losses, and for your 3rd loss to beat Auburn, that would be absolutely insane. Because that would definitely shake a little bit of stuff up in the SEC, I think. But yeah, Auburn is just a horrific football team. They're not disciplined. They're just not good on either side of the ball. And I think I can't believe the spread's only 2.5. Is that what you said? I'm surprised. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Texas A&M goes in here and absolutely blows these guys out. So
yeah, I agree there. We'll jump over back to the Big 12. You have Iowa State, Utah. Iowa State, like you said, they have back-to-back losses. Texas Tech, Kansas get back in the winning column against Cincinnati. This Iowa State is headed to Salt Lake City to play Utah. Utah always plays tough defensive games. Offense hasn't necessarily been there. Their leading passer, one little brother of Zach Wilson, 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns on the season. Utah is coming off 5 straight losses. It's just things aren't going right for Utah this year. Usually they're a team that can surprise some people. We talked about it. We've seen it in the past where they, past few years, they seem to have USC's number in some big games with them. But Iowa State's favored in this one by 6. I'm going to take Rocco Becht and this Iowa State team, to continue getting back in that win column after those 2 losses. They want to stay in the hunt for a potential shot at the Big 12 championship game, because they're in a 2-way tie with Arizona State behind BYU and Colorado. And, you're a few upsets away from still being potentially in that Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, I'm going to take Iowa State. Utah's terrible. They don't have Cam Rising. That's a huge gut punch to those guys, because I know we talked about it last week, but I think if Cam Rising plays in that game last week against BYU, they probably win that game. I'm not going to lie to you. But, yeah, Utah's offensively, they're just making way too many mistakes. Way too many mistakes. Their defense just can't stop anybody from scoring right now. They're having a rough time. Everything they try to do right just goes wrong. As you can see, 5 straight losses. That does a lot to your mentality. So I expect it to be 6 straight losses after this week against Iowa State. So,
yeah, agree. We'll jump over to some Sun Belt football. You have the Marshall Thundering Herd taking on Old Dominion Monarchs, 7-3. Marshall, 4-6. Old Dominion. Braxton leading the way for Marshall, 1,100 yards through the air, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The running back for Marshall, A.J. Turner, 86 carries, 793 yards, 6 touchdowns. On the other side of the ball, Joseph for Old Dominion, 1,396 yards, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions through the air. Marshall coming off 4 straight wins, with the most recent being over Coastal Carolina. Old Dominion, 2 straight losses, App State, James Madison. Old Dominion's favored by 1.5, with this being a home game, but I have a hard time seeing Old Dominion win this game. Marshall is leading the conference at 5-1, and I think they continue to roll here. Give me the Thundering Herd in this one.
Yeah, I'm taking Marshall as well. I can't soundly pick someone who lost to Appalachian State. That's just, I can't do that. So I don't think Old Dominion wins. I'm taking Marshall.
Yeah. We'll jump over back to the Big Ten. USC, UCLA, the rivalry game of LA. USC favored by 5 in this one. They are 5-5 on the season, 3-5 in conference play. UCLA is 4-6 on the season, 3-5 in conference play. USC coming off a win against Nebraska, 28-20. UCLA coming off a loss to Washington. Both these teams did lose to Washington. Both teams beat Rutgers. Both teams beat Nebraska. So, these teams have been having very similar years. Miller Moss started the season hot for USC, but has really struggled here of late. He has 2,500 yards on the season, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Marks for USC 1,000 yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns. Garbers for UCLA 2,100 yards, 14 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. UCLA no ground game. Their leading rusher 384 yards on the season, 1 touchdown. I think in this game, even though the teams are not going to have far to travel, with it being in the Rose Bowl, this is a big game in Pasadena. USC, to me, is the favorite in this one. As bad as they've been this season, I think they get the win over their in-city rivalry, UCLA.
Yeah, I'm going to go with USC too. It seems offensively they're more sound on both sides of the ball. They're not very one-dimensional. And I think if they can play 50% on both sides of the ball, I think they're better than UCLA. UCLA seems like they're very one-dimensional, no ground game, but a lot of mistakes through the air, and they're not very sound defensively. And I think to be one-dimensional and mistake-prone, I think is a recipe for disaster. So give me USC to win this game.
Agreed there very much. As we wrap up the pick'ems this week, we go to some Mountain West play here as you have Colorado State taking on Fresno State in Fresno, California. Colorado State sitting at number 2 in the Mountain West, just behind Boise State. Both these teams undefeated, looking for a potential matchup in the Mountain West Championship game. Fresno State 3-3 in conference play, 5-5, 500 on the season. Fowler for Colorado State, 1,800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on the season. Just not impressive there. Mikey Keene on the other side for Fresno, 2,400 yards on the season, 15 touchdowns, 11 interceptions through the air. Morrow for Colorado State, 872 yards, 9 touchdowns on the ground. Fresno's favored by 2.5 in this one as the home team. Colorado State coming off, several, 5 straight victories here, most recently in Wyoming. You have Fresno coming off 2 straight losses, with one of those being against Hawaii, 21-20.
Can't do it.
And then Air Force, 36-28. You lose to Hawaii, that's not a good look. I mean, it's just not, if we're being honest. It's like you said with App State. It's hard to trust a team that loses to Hawaii when, we know what Hawaii is historically. They're 2-4 in conference play, 4-7 on the season. And this has got to be an ugly game. I've got to take Colorado State in this one.
Yeah, I want to take Colorado State. Like you said, you lost to Hawaii. I cannot pick a team that has lost to Hawaii. Can't do it. And then to come back the next week and to lose to Air Force, can't do it. I cannot trust a team who's doing that. Can't do it. We'll never pick a team who's doing that. So give me Colorado State to win this game.
Yeah. That wraps up our picks for the week. It should be another exciting week of college football. Dylan's going to be stressing out all week as we build up to a big matchup for his Ohio State Buckeyes. And, what could determine if they're in that Big Ten championship game or not. At the end of the day, the window is wide open for Indiana. Can they, find success in what's going to be their toughest game of the season? Can Ohio State come out and do what they need to do to, force that rematch with Oregon in the Big Ten championship game? Throughout other games in college football, not too many huge games going on that we didn't highlight already through the pick'em. You look through an interesting game of note. Notre Dame, that somehow worked their way back up to number 8 after a terrible loss against NIU early in the season, are going to be playing Army this week. Army is undefeated, ranked 24. Would love to see them knock off Notre Dame.
Me too.
That Black Knights offense, we talked about the service schools last week. Army's having an incredible season with, we talked about, these service schools don't always have the best offenses, the most talented players, but, for what Army's done this year, for what they got, I would love to see them keep it rolling.
Yeah, I would too. I would love to watch the Notre Dame team get knocked off by not just NIU, but Army in the same year. That would be awesome. That would be awesome to watch.
Yeah, 100%. So that kind of wraps up this week's episode of Saturday Showdown. As we mentioned, we didn't get a chance to have him elaborate more, but go check out Kent at Casual BIG10. Join us talking football. Go check out his channel and everything. Great work over there. And, I'm ready to see what chaos this weekend brings to continue this insane college football season already. What surprises are we going to have this week? Who gets knocked off that we didn't expect? What tough games are there? We'll see how much hair Dylan has left when we get back here next week. But until then, let's enjoy another great week of college football, and we'll see you back here next Monday to recap it all.